Now back live to the White House for a joint news conference with President Bush and German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Thank you all. It's such an honor to welcome Chancellor Angela Merkel here to the White House. We just had a long visit. The first thing I did was ask everybody to leave the room except for the Chancellor. And we talked about our philosophy and our hopes. We talked about our desire to work together to accomplish important goals for the world, starting with peace. We share a deep desire to help those who suffer. We care about the hungry and the sick. Germany is a valued ally. We've got a friendship that's important. We've got to share common values based upon human rights and human decency and rule of law, freedom to worship and freedom to speak, freedom to write what you want to write. We've got important job ahead of us to work on key issues like Iran. We spent some time talking about the Iranian issue and the desire to solve this issue diplomatically by working together. We talked about the war on terror. I told the Chancellor that there's still an enemy that wants to do harm to the American people and others who like freedom. An enemy there that lurks, and that we've got to share information and share intelligence and work carefully to protect our peoples. That the threat is real, and that my obligation as the President of this country is to do everything in my power to protect the people, and we can't do it alone. We talked about Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Thank the Chancellor for Germany's contribution in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country that has gone from being ruled brutally by the Taliban, a group of people who have values the exact opposite of the values of America and the German people, the one that's now beginning to see the light of freedom. Democracy yields the peace. It's important that democracy succeed in Afghanistan. I want to thank the German people and the German government for their contributions. We talked about Iraq, and we've had our disagreements on Iraq, obviously. It's been a difficult issue in our relationship, and I fully understand that. But in spite of different disagreements, we share the desire for the Iraqi people to live in freedom. And I want to thank the German government for help with reconstruction. We talked about Israel and Palestine. Both of us care deeply about the health of Ariel Sharon, Prime Minister Sharon, and we wish him all the very best and hope for his recovery. We also care deeply about the plight of the people in that part of the world, and we hope that there will be two states living side by side in peace. We talked about NATO as the foundation of our collective defense and consultations. We talked about the importance of trade relations and business relations and commerce so that people on both sides of the Atlantic in our respective countries can find meaningful, high-paying jobs. We talked about a lot. And the reason we talked about a lot is because we've got a lot in common. And the reason we talked about a lot because there's a lot of issues in the world that require our intense cooperation and desire to work together. And I appreciate the candid conversation, and I appreciate the beginning of what's going to be an important relationship for the sake of our respective peoples.
Dankeschön. Well, thank you very much. And let me say that we indeed had a very open, a very candid discussion, one that was characterized by a spirit of trust that builds on a long tradition of German-American relations. But I think that will open up also a new chapter, as I hope, in their relationship. This is my first visit as Chancellor, heading a new federal government. And I explained that there are two objectives that we have set out for ourselves. First of all, as regards our domestic agenda, we would like to strengthen our economic, force our economic strength. We look at the challenges that globalization entails, and we would like to explain to our people that in order to meet the social challenges ahead, we need to be economically strong. And I think there is a lot of common ground here, because we are at one in thinking that obviously we ought not to fall back into isolationist tendencies. We know that these tendencies are there, for example, in the European Union. We think we ought to meet these challenges of competition head on. And I think what we need to do is we need to convince our people to believe in themselves and to believe that even in the face of the challenges of globalization, prosperity and social equality is possible. Secondly, apart from the domestic component, Germany wants to be a reliable partner to our partners in the world, but also to our partners in Europe. And in order to be able to do that, well, Europe, as you know, is composed of smaller and larger nations. We've talked about the European Union. We talked about the possibilities and the chances open to the European Union. And I think it's essential that those countries that feel that they share common ground as regards values in the Western world stand together. And for Germany, I would like to say that throughout the period of the Cold War, the fact that for more than 40 years we believed in the value of freedom actually was the firm foundation for what was possible later on in European unification. The fact that your father, sir, partnership and leadership, that was an incredible offer that was made to us by President Bush at the time. And I think that this is certainly in our vested interest to work together with you. What does that mean, our vested interest? It means that we face the challenges in the world today head on. It means that after the threat through the Cold War is no longer with us, obviously the threat of terrorism is certainly the greatest challenge to our security in the 21st century. There may sometimes be differences as to the acuteness of that danger, as to what form it presents itself, how we actually also counteract here, and how we face up to this threat. Afghanistan, for example, is a case in point. We are engaged there. We're committed to Afghanistan because we see that as a vested interest. We think it is only in our interest that the whole of this region is stabilized. The same goes for Iraq. Secure democratic structures ought to be in existence in Iraq. This is in our vested interest, in spite of the fact that we don't have troops on the ground there. Stability there is in our very own vested interest, and we've shown that through commitments that we've entered on in other areas. On the Balkans too, their stability is the only promising sign which can actually ensure stability for the whole of the region. And NATO, for me, is the forum where we need to discuss, where we need to debate strategic issues and what we think is necessary as regards our further military capabilities. We also openly address that there sometimes have been differences of opinion. I mentioned Guantanamo in this respect, but I think that at the end of the day, what counts is that we come back to a situation where we openly address all of the issues, not only how we envisage the fight against terrorism, but I just mean a very broad-based debate, for example, on trade issues. How do we see our relationship with China? How do you see our relationship with Russia? What sort of strategic relationships do we want to forge as Western nations? And this is why I'm so happy about the fact that we were at one in saying we need to intensify our contacts further. We need to address all of these issues. And I think a very successful chapter, for example, was opened over the past few days and weeks as regards Iran. to us Germans too, it is totally unacceptable what Iran has said recently, for example, as regards the questioning the right of existence of Israel, the statements that were made with relevance to the Holocaust. And it's essential, we feel, that the EU3, together with the United States, take a common position here, become active, that we try to persuade as many other countries as possible to join themselves to us, to ally themselves with us, and we will certainly not be intimidated by a country such as Iran. I must say that I was greatly encouraged by our meeting here today, Mr. President, and I hope and trust that we shall continue our very good discussions, that we will further intensify them. We have every opportunity, I think, to intensify our economic relations, our business relations, relations in the area of research and development, in foreign policy, and I'm very, very pleased that we made such a good start here today.
With Terry.
Chancellor Merkel has said that the U.S. prison camp at Guantanamo should not be kept open indefinitely. Are you willing to close it down anytime soon? And Chancellor, what are your concerns about Guantanamo?
Yes, she brought up the subject, and I can understand why she brought it up, because there's some misperceptions about Guantanamo. First of all, I urge any journalist to go down there and look at how the folks that are being detained there are treated. These are people picked up off a battlefield who want to do harm. A lot of folks have been released from Guantanamo. Like the Chancellor, I'd like to see a way forward there. The way forward, of course, is ultimately through a court system. I think the best way for the court system to proceed is through our military tribunals, which is now being adjudicated in our courts of law, to determine whether or not this is the appropriate path for a country that bases itself on rule of law to adjudicate those held at Guantanamo. The answer to your question is Guantanamo is a necessary part of protecting the American people, and so long as the war on terror goes on, and so long as there's a threat, we will inevitably need to hold people that would do ourselves harm in a system that in which people will be treated humanely, and in which ultimately there is going to be a end, which is a legal system. We're waiting for our own courts to determine how that's best to proceed.
Well, it is true that we address this issue openly, and I think it's, after all, only one facet in our overall fight against terrorism. I made it very clear that I completely share your assessment as regards the nature and dimension of this threat, and that the Federal Republic of Germany, just as other European countries, need to come up with convincing proposals as to how we ought to deal with detainees, for example, who do not feel bound by any law, and how do we deal with people who come from countries where such state structures don't exist. So I think what we need to address is how we further want to proceed. We need to, for example, find a reform of the international law in this respect, and I think the United Nations is indeed a good forum to do that. But I think that's part of a permanent dialogue between our two countries, where we really need to debate how we wish to proceed further. And the basis and the common ground needs to be, we have shared values, and I see that this is a very best precondition, even though from time to time we may have differences of opinion here.
Want to call on somebody? Yeah.
N24 Deutsche.
Peter Limburg, N24 German.
Been discussed. Are you in favor of sanctions against Iran in the Security Council, and what kind of sanctions should it be? And another question is, in Germany there's a discussion about intelligence, Secret Service people working in Baghdad during the Iraq War. From your knowledge, did the German intelligence help the US before and during the Iraq War in Baghdad?